Workplace violence and bullying seldom happens in a vacuum, but rather is led up to with warning signs and events. Our guest for this episode is Timothy A. Dimoff. He is president of SACS Consulting and Investigative Services, a high-risk HR and security consulting and investigation firm. As a nationally recognized expert in high-risk security and human resources, he is a sought-after consultant, speaker, media commentator, and expert witness. Timothy has more than 40 years' experience in law enforcement, corporate security, and consulting. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey Podcast. Tim, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you speaking with the audience today. Can you give me a little bit of background about yourself and what your company does?
Yeah, my first career was 20 years in law enforcement. I worked for a Akron, Ohio Police Department and then the Federal Task Force. And ironically, being involved in the police department for 20 years really prepared me for my second career, because when I was on a department, I didn't work patrol more than a couple of years. I got into high crimes unit, SWAT team, dealing and confronting with high level type of agitated individuals, undercover narcotics, major cases. And all along, I had a plethora of training. Once I retired from the police and law enforcement field, I then got into the field in corporations dealing with a combination of human resource and security issues. And all of a sudden, all these interesting topics came up in situations and challenges like active shooter, workplace violence, bullying, harassment, discrimination, internal problems. Really came down to people issues and people problems. And we became a specialist, not only in Ohio, but nationally in these areas. And thus, 20 years later, we're training and talking about it all over the country.
Wow, it's an amazing background, having gone from law enforcement all the way into training people on how to keep themselves safe at work.
Yeah, and it's been rewarding because I've been able to take everything that I've been taught, both careers and even in my family and my upbringing, and apply it towards a positive. And our whole goal is to help companies, organizations change their culture to a more positive culture.
That's great. So talking about workplace bullying, what are the types of workplace bullying that are commonly seen, going from kind of least intrusive to worst case scenario?
Yeah, the what we call the low level bullying is that simple intimidation. It's somebody doesn't like someone is jealous of someone wants somebody's job, someone's fighting another person for the next promotion. It's that low level. And so what happens there is people go out of their way to embarrass or intimidate or to degrade someone in order to get themselves to a higher level or a promotion or better pay, or to stand out and look better in the eyes of their coworkers. So it's really a selfish bullying of intimidation. So that's the low level. The higher level is somebody that really just has a higher level of anger or dislike for someone, and they really want to go out of their way to damage them in some way. It could be physical, but a lot of times it's just mental and social, and to degrade them and to get other people not to associate or like them. So, it's like an accordion. It can be from A to Z, but it usually starts out on those low levels.
So starting with a low level, you're talking about things like low level intimidation and making the person feel bad and trying to jockey for position. What are other types of behavioral things that people should be watching out for?
I think what you have to look out there for is that someone is setting up and presenting you as somebody that you're not. Mm-hmm. Don't go to lunch with Sally because she said this and did that, or she wore that dress yesterday to intimidate all the other girls in the office, planting those seeds of deception and negativity, trying to win more people over to like you and be on your side and less people on someone else's, and to dislike somebody.
Gotcha. So are there things that the person who's the victim of the intimidation can do? Like, are there certain behaviors that they are exhibiting which is attracting that attention? And are there things that they could do to kind of limit what's going on with that respect?
Well, anytime, if I take you back to high school and you remember in high school when someone would pick on somebody and their reaction would be, like, oh my gosh, and this and that, and they would really get a rise out of them, versus you'd make fun of somebody and they'd go, I don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
Well, human nature is simple. Where you get your reaction is where you continue and where it increases. So the first thing is to try to downplay anything that happens, especially at the beginning stages, because if they can get a rise or a reaction out of you, you become more attractive for that bullying. So first thing is try not to react to it in any magnificent or larger way. In fact, if you can totally just disregard it, almost like I don't really care and it doesn't bother me, you'd be surprised how much of that they move on to a victim who will react.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that all the time. But once again, that's easier said than done. Guys tend to blow that off easier and can deal with it versus a female who generally is more emotional. Doesn't make either one better or worse. It's just the human nature of it. And we see that all the time, where we see more prominence in female bullying than we do in the male bullying, because the male bullying goes a different direction most times.
Gotcha. So I assume at some point there's a transition from, well, let me ignore this, to, do I get HR involved? Do I get management involved? Do I go to that person's manager? Do I go to my manager to kind of like say, hey, this is not okay?
Where you go next is it starting to happen on a semi-regular basis? Remembering bullying is defined by one major thing, that it's a ongoing, continuous, off and on type of action. That's bullying.
So it's not like someone just had a bad day, but this is week in, week out.
Yeah, where you see it on some sort of semi-regular or regular basis, not a one-time thing. The other thing that sets bullying apart is it's not physical. They're not spitting on you. They're not tripping you. They're not punching you. They're not bumping into you. They're not threatening you. That takes it to workplace violence. So it's the off and on continuous type of verbal or intimidation is really what bullying's about. So if you get to that point, that's when, couple things. First, you should be logging what's going on, date, time, what they said, what they did. If you can go to HR or your supervisor with a piece of paper and it lists 6, 8, 10, 12 incidences in the last 1 to 4 weeks, you're going to get a lot more reception from that supervisor because you have organized it. If you organize it, they're going to interpret that as it really happened, it's out of hand, and you're giving them something to work with a lot easier than a he said, she said type of dispute.
So a significant portion of being able to work with HR on it is that documentation portion. Without that, it becomes a little more complicated.
Yeah, in the majority of the cases at my company, SACS Consulting, we investigate these kind of internal cases all the time for companies. And first thing we ask is we want to do an interview with the victim. And we ask them, did you log it? And I would tell you 80 to 90% of the time, no one logged anything. No one wrote anything down. They can remember quite a bit. So then we say, go back. Whatever you can remember, even if the dates you're not exactly sure, if you can log at least what happened in each month in the last 6 months or 2 months, and we have them log it. And then if they're willing to log it, that tells us even more. It kind of confirms that it probably happened and they're more serious. But it also gives you HR and gives us as investigators a lot more stronger stance. And then we can talk to other people in the business and say, did you notice this happened about a week ago? Did you overhear this? Did you see this? Has this ever happened to you or others? And it gives us a more organized. It really keeps it objective because maybe that person made that stuff up because they're the ones that don't like the other person, and it really didn't happen. And I do want to say from the beginning, about a third of the accusations that happen, especially a sexual harassment case, and other types of intimidation cases and bullying, anywhere from a fourth to a third of them we discover are false.
Wow. That's kind of scary. It's almost, almost kind of flips it on its head in terms of like, you have to watch both sides of it and not just assume that, okay, every accusation is true, which I think all accusations need to be taken seriously, but you really have to kind of bring somebody in from outside to figure out what's really going on.
Yeah, I think it's extremely difficult for a company to investigate those kinds of cases internally themselves. First off, the victim, the witnesses, the other potential employees, they really don't want to reveal this information to an internal person they know that they're going to continue to work with for many years. Take sexual harassment. A female having to discuss what she feels inappropriate to someone internally who's going to be there for many years, but an outsider, it's more comfortable. The other thing it does is when an outside investigation comes in, it tells the victims, it tells the current employees, it tells the perpetrators, this company is not going to allow this to continue or happen. It sets a tone for corrective behavior by many.
And I assume it also kind of brings in the fact that if you're bringing in an outside company, this is going to be unbiased. We're not sweeping it under the rug. You're not having to worry about, well, this manager likes this person who was complained about, so maybe it's not going to be handled appropriately.
That's exactly right. I'll give you a very true example. When we convince companies to put those anonymous hotlines in, those 800 complaint lines, and that you can call into a company and you want to report anything from a theft to a bullying to, hey, this tool is broken. When we put the hotlines in on the businesses, we see a minimum of a 40 to 60%, but a minimum of 40% increase in information coming to the company.
Wow.
Because it's anonymous.
Yeah, people really want to be able to express what they're feeling and what's going on without that fear of retaliation or whose side is going to be taken in this.
They're simply more comfortable, yes.
So when you earlier you talked about it potentially things escalating beyond just he said, she said, making people feel bad, jockeying for position, more towards the actual workplace violence. Where do you kind of see that escalation happening?
Well, we see it happening usually when the bullying goes unanswered and unanswered by management. Mm-hmm. Management, first of all, should have anti-bullying, workplace violence, harassment, discrimination, all those hot buttons clearly explained in their employee manual. Those are unacceptable. They should clearly say all of those complaints will be objectively investigated. And when they do happen, they should immediately do some form of investigation internally, externally. And once again, a lot of companies haven't done those nuts and bolts that they need to do. But whether they have it or not, it gets reported. It should be promptly investigated objectively.
Gotcha. So once it starts escalating from, let's call it emotional to a physical violence, what could people do to protect them, other employees and victims protect themselves from those situations even getting that far? Is it just a matter of reporting?
Yeah, number one, they got to report it. Number two, if they do report it, immediately somebody or several people need to be suspended from work, staying at home, told not to come back until they've done a thorough investigation. That doesn't mean they can't be paid. It doesn't mean that they're guilty. It means we can't roll the dice and take chances. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with temporarily suspending someone from coming to the workplace due to the circumstances.
And I assume this also potentially leads to, if someone in that sort of situation does get let go, there's that threat of them coming back to the office in kind of, now it's no longer me and this particular individual, or maybe it still is that, but now there's this aggression towards the office as a whole. What are the things that employees and companies can do to mitigate that risk?
Well, what we've seen and what you're talking about is we terminate an employee and we get some pretty clear, strong messages of aggression or potential retaliation. And it isn't just necessarily active shooter. It can be other types of retaliation. They can come back and key a car. They can come back and slice tires. They can come back and meet someone in the parking lot and beat them up. They can come back with a gun, a baseball bat to the building. So it's everything from A to Z on the scale of aggressive behavior. But once you have any kind of termination, and there is a indication of aggression, retaliation of any sort, or potential that it could happen, you really need to move into another level. And that level is you need to put some precautionary things in place, such as contacting outside sources, including police, other security. My company, SACS Consulting, we specialize in responding to what we call terminated employee threats. Now, just to show you what level we're at today, 10 years ago, SACS Consulting would get maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 calls a year that, hey, we're going to terminate an employee, or we just did. This guy is a ticking time bomb, got a lot of aggression, said a lot of crazy things, threatened, et cetera, et cetera. We got, once again, 3 to 5 of those a year 10 years ago. We are averaging in Ohio 7 of those phone calls for assistance per month.
Oh, my goodness.
Per month. Now, our companies outside of Ohio, add another 5 to that, we're in at 10 to 12 to 13 per month, to the point where I have a team of responsible, very highly trained individuals that deal nothing but terminated employee threats on a constant basis. They are a threat response team that we employ or deploy out, and their job is nothing. And we have to go to these locations, boost the security, do a significant detailed background on the potential perpetrator, assess their level of anger and aggression, monitor them, and then we got to figure out how we diffuse them down. We track and diffuse them down. Sometimes we have to confront them. Sometimes we get them anger management help. Sometimes we get them other types of things. But we got to somehow diffuse this situation. That is common today compared to what it was 10 years ago.
Do you think that's more that it's more of the see something, say something being more of a common practice, and that people are now maybe taking the threats more seriously? Or do you think that there's actually more threats happening now?
I think that, once again, with the internet, with the change in society in general, that we are promoting a society where if you have anger, if you're mad at somebody, we don't really promote calmly dealing with it. We really promote scream, yell, and confront. And we're seeing it in sports. We're seeing it in politics. We're seeing it in events. And we're seeing it on TV, videos, and shows. We're just showing more aggression as an answer to a disagreement. And I really think we've really converted a lot of people thinking that, yeah, that's a proper reaction. I have the right to react that way. I have the freedom of the First Amendment. I can say whatever I want, et cetera, et cetera. And we're glorifying it with our media. So I think we've really done a bad job of promoting it in the wrong way. And I think people are feeling it's okay or more comfortable doing it, or tough. That's the way I felt, and I see it every day. I see examples of it every day. And I think it's a sad commentary on the direction that we're going in society in general. And like I said, don't think it's just in the workplace. We're showing it off every day. And once again, I'm going to say sports and politics and other types of events and debates that go on. It can get very aggressive, mean, and attacking type of nature.
So is there any, what is the one best tip that you would have for an employee who feels uncomfortable at work or unsafe at their workplace?
My number one suggestion to any employee that feels uncomfortable or unsafe, which will help get more results, better results, and get the ball rolling faster and quicker, is logging the incidences or instance, writing it down, date, time, what happened. That gets more effective results than anything else they can do.
Gotcha. And I guess maybe I was kind of thinking through this. What if it's, the owner of the company that is treating their employees this way? What options do the employees have in that sort of situation, other than maybe I'm just out of here, I don't want to deal with this?
Well, once again, and ironically, I get asked that question. What do you do if it's the boss? And once again, I'm going to say, log it, make details of it, and then you can take it to somebody else in the business who can confront that individual, or you can take it to an attorney outside the company and have him send a letter. I'm representing a client unnamed at this time, and this is the general feeling of things that are happening with multiple people there. Most likely, if it happens to one, it's to many, and want to make you aware of it because you are on the fence of a very significant type of lawsuit and litigation. And we think first you need to know, as the owner, that your conduct is not acceptable. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that straightens up an owner because you talk litigation, and sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then that individual has a stronger case if it continues, and they log it, and they can leave, and then they can press the legal issue they left because of it. They gave him an opportunity, and he or she did not change.
And I guess the key is don't be confrontational with the person in that sense. Don't be the person who escalates it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, don't be part of the fire. Don't be the log on the fire.
Yeah, that would be a bad scenario.
On the fire.
And I assume you actually do see that happening fairly frequently, unfortunately.
We see the boss situation happening. I won't say that it's anywhere near a majority at all, but we do see some cases of that. And we do see cases where it's maybe not the president of the company, but it's your immediate supervisor. Mm-hmm. So once again, logging it, talking to somebody outside that immediate supervisor, a different supervisor. Let's just say it's your direct supervisor. You take your complaint to the CFO then, to the HR person, to another supervisor you respect, and say, can you help me with this? So, yeah, we do see that. And I want to say bullying happens between employee and employee, and it happens between employee against management and manager against employee. So it's all the different relationships that takes place.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's not just, downward focused. You really have to look at it from different directions. A lot of people think bullying is just between employee and employee, and that's not true. A supervisor has a distinct advantage to use their level of supervision or their level of management against an employee in the wrong way. Yeah, that's that threat of I control your job, I control your employment, so therefore they have a little bit more leverage, and they unfortunately choose to exercise that in a negative way.
Yeah, and we see that truly with the supervisor-employee situation, like in sexual harassment and intimidation. We see leveraging the fact they're their boss, and in a lot of sexual harassment cases. So it's, once again, I say, look, this is human nature, and human nature in the wrong way.
That's very unfortunate.
Yes, it is.
So do you represent companies or companies and individuals?
We've worked on both sides of the fence. A lot of times we get a lot of companies calling us with not so much to defend the company, but really our calls most of the time are a company saying, we got this complaint from this individual. We don't know what the truth is. We're calling you to objectively find the truth. Most companies call us to find out the truth. And once we give them the truth, most of the companies, in fact, many or almost all of them, will take appropriate action. It's just that they're caught off guard. They don't know about it. They didn't have a clue. Now, sometimes they do, but it's amazing. A lot of times, these complaints are totally fresh to this company.
Mm-hmm.
And, they call us and say, we want the truth. If our manager's guilty, we want to know. If this person's guilty in the warehouse, we want to know. If this, partner is guilty, we want to know. So I still respect the fact that most of our calls come in for seeking the truth. And I'm really glad that still is the majority of cases.
Yeah, I really like that the people are wanting the truth as opposed to, I want to stick it to somebody or, I want them gone and we're just looking for a way to make it happen as opposed to the truth is important.
And I've testified for what I call victims who are employees being represented by attorneys. And that attorney calls me and says, I got a client. She's female. She's claiming sexual harassment and bullying. Tim, I want you to conduct an investigation and see if her accusations are true. So once again, it doesn't matter which side. What we're looking for is someone that wants the truth. If we get a call from an attorney that says, my client is saying that she was harassed and bullied, and I believe her and this and that, and I want you to get in there and dig it and find us all the ammunition you can, I'm going to say, I'm the wrong guy. My company's wrong. I want to tell you, we want to work for you. We want to find out, but we want to find out the truth. And that means your client could be lying. Sir, let me remind you, somewhere around 1/4 to 1/3 of the accusations are lies. They're fabricated. They're looking for a lawsuit, a payoff. There's jealousies. I could go on. But for you, if you want us to work for you and you want to hire us, tell me that you'll live with the truth. We'll go find out. Now, we may come back with a plethora of information that's to your benefit. But what happens if we find a lot of information that's not to your benefit? Are you and do you want to know that? If they don't say yes, we don't take that investigation, because all I'm going to do is have someone hire me and give them something they didn't want, and then try to get paid, try to argue with them that this is that. And besides that, from a moral and ethical, our company, myself, we're not paid to swing a case. We're paid to find the truth.
That's great. So if people want to reach out to you and your company, how can they get a hold of you?
They can do a couple things. If they can go on the almighty internet, Google, and SACS Consulting, SACS, SACS Consulting. Tim Dimoff, just remember Tim and Dimoff Delights, Tim Dimoff. You Google either one of those and you'll get just a load of information about the company, about myself, about our expertise. We have a webpage, SACS, SACS Consulting.com. There's a national speaker site, TimothyDimoff.com. Lots out there. Just click on us and we'll help. And I always tell everybody, you can call me with any question. You can email me with any question, debate. I never charge for that initial, information or discussion. Give me a phone call, give me an email, and I'll be glad to talk to you and give you a sense of direction. I think everybody in the beginning needs to ask some initial questions, and they're just looking for some primer information, and I like to supply that. Our company is very good at it. We're very objective, and we love to engage people in conversation.
Great. Thank you very much for coming on, Tim. I really appreciate your expertise and what you've had to share with us today, and we'll make sure to put the links and everything like that in the show notes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Pray podcast. If you found this episode helpful, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Notes and a transcript of this episode with Timothy Dimoff can be found at easypray.com/13. Have you been a victim of a scam, and are you interested in sharing your story with the Easy Pray audience? Head over to easypray.com/mystory to learn more.